Welcome to our first presentation of the fourth summit on post-separation violence. The summit is called Break the Silence, as that is the goal of actually this series of summits that happen every 4 months. They happen every 4 months virtually on Zoom, and they gather resources from many different countries, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So first, I want to thank immense thanks to all of our attendees. We have attendees from several different countries. Our main focus is Quebec in Canada, our French-speaking community. And we also have attendees who attend the summit from the rest of Canada, from other locations around the world. We actually made a map of the 18 different locations that we've had attendees and presenters from. So we want to thank our attendees because the summit is made for the attendees and made possible by the attendees. The attendees of the summit attend for free. They are victims of post-separation violence. They are advocates or professionals in the field. This is a particular summit as it gathers victims and professionals so they can all learn together, because we believe that the victims are top experts on the topic of post-separation violence and that no one knows it better than they do, unfortunately, in a sense. Also want to thank our presenters. So our presenters are, we've had about 300 attendees from the first summit, which happened in September 2023. Is that correct? Yes. September 2023 was the first summit. And then we've had, this is the fourth one, so about 300 attendees since then. If you're in the world of business or the world of summits, you'll know that that's a very good number, and particularly on a topic that is not very trendy, not very easy to get reach for on social media either. And presenters, we've had a couple dozen presenters. Many of them are from Quebec and speak French. We have bilingual presenters from Canada, and then we have English-speaking presenters from the United States, other locations around the world, and we also have French-speaking presenters from France and from other locations. So this is a really exciting possibility to bridge the to actually build bridges between communities that speak different languages, and also have perhaps different approaches, different views, different experiences that we can put together. A lot of our presenters are professionals, they're scientists, or they do research in universities, or we have some that are testimonials and tips from victims themselves who have become either a coach or different types of services that can be brought. So third, thank you to our sponsors. Sponsors are either individual businesses, organizations who choose to financially support the summits, which allowed us to actually be able to put in place quite a few of our tech items, and just generally keep holding the summits and keep gathering resources. So all the resources that are presented in each presentation are available on our website. The new domain is solyane.com, SOLYANE.com. And the website link is in our email signature if you're looking for that. It's English and French, so you may need to, we have a collaborator who worked on the website for us, so you need to navigate a little bit, but on the looking for help or need help tab, you will find all of the resources that have been presented, and resources are of all kinds. So I'm going to talk about that. This is the intro by founders, and I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to introduce the organization we created to put the summits forth, and a little bit about the theme for this summit, and is there hope? Like, are there some solutions out there? Yes, so if you're watching this, you've registered for the summit or you are registered for another summit, because all summit attendees can watch all of the videos from all of the summits for a short time after each summit. And if you want to watch all of the videos at any time, all of the time, and at the same time support us, you can purchase a VIP pass to watch all of the videos. If you are unable to do so, if you're a victim of post-separation violence or whatever the reason, just let us know, and we are always happy to help access the resources. And yeah, so introduce myself, introduce the organization, and then the topic for the theme for this, and the hope part. The hope part is, are there some resources that are coming out that are actually making a difference as far as the risk for post-separation violence victims. And I would say that right away, the short answer is no, I have not spoken to anyone anywhere, any part of the planet yet who has found a way to stop the violence, to create a no-risk situation. And unfortunately, most places around the world, societies are tolerating that. It's being tolerated that people are losing their lives or losing their livelihood or losing their safety. And we're talking about victims and their children. So that is one important topic, and we present that in a ebook that we've called Flowers in the Night. So I'll start by introducing myself so you know where I'm coming from on this topic. I'm Charlotte Habiger. I'm a connector, a multi-entrepreneur. I've been building businesses since I was 16, and projects. I used to be called a project girl when I was in high school. And I decided to stop trying to refrain from creating and launching projects. I am a scientist by training. So as a scientist by training, and then I became a single mom when I left a situation of domestic violence. And then I'll just make sure I pin this. Pin and spotlight, just a quick tech. Okay, so I left a situation of domestic violence many, many years ago, and I do not talk about my story in the summits. However, I became a single mom and started living, from my own businesses. And one of the things that we've decided to do with my husband, I am remarried, my husband and I, we decided to start these summits because we found out that there are people all over the planet, everywhere, experiencing post-separation violence and not finding solutions to end the actual violence. So their lives are in danger. I mean, everybody knows a little bit about it, but not everyone knows really about the details of what people go through when they leave domestic violence. So we have a lot of resources for people who are trying to leave domestic violence, to identify it, to be safe, to go somewhere like for example, a shelter for women who have experienced domestic violence. However, after that, even though there are some services for the first couple of weeks or first couple of months, there are also obviously social services for anyone who's going through a difficult time. However, in our case, and what we've seen is that there is nothing out there really for people who are still experiencing post-separation violence months, years, or decades later. And their lives may be in danger. They might have recognized, no contact order, et cetera, et cetera. So this summit is a space to gather people who are presenting resources that are helpful to someone who is leaving a situation of domestic violence and is still experiencing various forms of abuse afterwards. So the resources that are presented can be free services by government agencies, shelters, social services. It can also be paid services by professionals who have started their own business and who offer product services that may be helpful. And these are there are all kinds. So also people who are like, we've talked to police officers, inspectors, people who have experience working with victims of post-separation violence. In the future, we'd also like to talk about the abusers themselves and maybe other solutions that may be out there. But at the moment, there is none to actually stop the violence. And one of the things that we've seen, and one of the things that has affected our summits, is that a lot of people don't agree with the fact that we're saying that there is no resource to stop the violence. But if you know of one, we'd be happy to be wrong. We would love for you to send us a resource that actually stops the violence. The only thing we've seen that can make people safer is for them to be empowered, educated, recognized, heard, and seen. Victims are actually very strong people, contrary to what is being told. If they've left domestic violence and they're still experiencing abuse, they are among the strongest people on the planet. They've left domestic violence because leaving domestic violence is not actually always a choice. It's it can be life or death. So, and the person usually gets a feel for that. So leaving domestic violence is actually escaping from domestic violence, fleeing domestic violence in a society or a place where it's actually tolerated, because it would be normal for it to be that if someone abuses someone, the abuser would be removed. And there aren't really, I think I've heard of a few programs like that, but it's not usually the general situation is that if someone's experiencing domestic violence, then they have to move to themselves out of the situation with their children, even though it could endanger their lives. Now, that's not my main topic today, so I'm just going to move on to the next part of this, because our goal at the summit is not to say that there's no resources only, it's to actually gather what does exist that can help people learn, become educated, and empower victims, and also advocates, and also the professionals who do work with them, like police officers. Obviously, if someone's in prison, there's a lesser chance that they will harm someone. However, they can still delegate it to someone else. We've explained quite a bit of this in our previous summit introduction, so you could rewatch that. It will be available to you. And there is also the ebook, Flowers in the Night. Flowers in the Night is a series of a couple stories around post-separation violence and some of the things that happen, and not everybody knows that. For example, some of the problems that happen, really serious issues after leaving someone, like after leaving a domestic violence situation, is the abuse through the judicial system. So there's not really an exact limit to how many times someone can contact your lawyer or bring you to court, for many different issues, minor issues, false allegations. There can be false allegations and accusations that are made to some appropriate institutions, even if they're false, they're made to other institutions about you. But there can also be false allegations and accusations made to inappropriate institutions. For example, just calling up, the abuser could call up one of the government agencies to say that you frauded them. So that would be an inappropriate institution for them to, try to bring out the judicial claims against you. And in all of this, it will cost time, money, and energy to the victim. So this is preventing them from earning an income, perhaps being full-time at a job, care for the children, taking their budget away. And this can go on for decades and decades. I've heard of people that it lasted for 40 or 50 years and they never really were able to get away from it. These are a couple examples. Another one is that all of this brings institutions and government agencies into play. And from what we've heard, most people we've talked to, and again, I'm not an expert in post-separation violence, other than the fact that I've spoken with people, I've experienced some myself, and I have a scientific background, so I've been doing compilation and research on this for about 20 years. And this summit is really a gathering of the resources. So I'm doing the introduction so that you have a context for why we are doing this. Another issue, yes. So when the institutions and government agencies and some workers come into play when someone is being is experiencing the post-separation violence, unfortunately, it seems that nobody on the planet yet, no country, no location has an actual appropriate way to manage post-separation violence. So they try different things with what they have. A lot of them try to use like domestic violence tools, but that doesn't work because the two people are not together anymore. They try to do conflict resolution when we're talking about violence. It's extremely ineffective. Like what people are trying to do in most locations around the world, it just doesn't work. Otherwise, we'd see, of course, fewer people dying and being abused. So one of the things that have come to mind is that domestic violence, we do have some resources that exist. People are able to leave safely at times. So why not replicate whatever was done in most places around the world to advance the cause of domestic violence, to advance the cause of post-separation violence? Now, this is very basic. We're talking about basic safety and security, being able to eat, sleep, and drink without being in danger, and the children of the victims as well. So one of the things that we are putting into place, and we started putting into place with this summit, is a virtual resource center. So our summits gather presenters. The presenters come and we record their presentations because, like I said before, a lot of the people who are registered, out of our hundreds of people who register for the summits, a lot of them prefer to watch the recordings rather than come on live for obvious reasons. And so because of that, we do now have about 100 presentations that are resources that have been recorded with our different presenters on different topics of different kinds. And that becomes a library of resources that we have decided to put into what we are calling a virtual resource center. So we actually have a virtual resource center, which for now is a list of presentations by different experts from all over the planet, mostly North America, about post-separation violence and what can help someone who may be in a situation of domestic violence and thinking of leaving, escaping, fleeing, or someone who is experiencing post-separation violence, whether it be the actual victim, spouse, partner, life partner. It can also be so many people around them that are affected. The children, the new spouse, co-workers, I don't know if it's the teacher, for example, of your children who's experiencing post-separation violence. It could affect the whole school. It could affect the whole community if something happens to her and that is found out. That could really be, some of these can really affect all of society. Actually, it does affect all of society, which is one other topic I'll get to. So where we've had presenters from, like I said, Quebec, rest of Canada, US, France, Mauritius Island, Sweden. We've spoken to people in Japan and Australia, and the experience is the same that right now, what abusers do is they do tend to use techniques that work. They use whatever works at the time. Right now, what works if there's been children is that if they pursue custody for long enough, they will obtain it. It's just the stats that show that. If you want the resources, I can share those with you. So what they will do is they will place or accept for custody to be with the abuser, and then the protective parent is cut off of contact. And why this matters and should matter to almost every single person living everywhere on the planet is that this does affect everyone and not just the two people where there's been violence of one against the other. How is that? It's because actually the children who are experiencing all of this are being they're being placed with the abuser, and then the fact that that happens brings out a lot of opportunities for the abusers to manipulate them and do a lot of controlling, and the coercive control continues with the children. And then what happens is that these children are I had written it, and I just want to say it the way I had written it because there was something specific. The children are isolated and they don't have access to accompaniment, professional help that is around the truth. They don't. So that is that they're not told the truth. And in that case, what happens is the children, when they grow up, so in 10, 20, 30, 40 years, 50 years after that, these children are in society and working, building our, future of our world. And they grew up in a situation where their trauma was not addressed, where they witnessed violence, but they were not taken care of and told about it, and where the truth of their own origin, their origin story with their family, their parents, where they grew up, is actually not what they were told. So that is a very serious matter. And we do have some of our experts and professionals and speakers who have come on to tell us about the effects on the physical health and the mental health of the children raised in these situations who were removed from the care of their protective parent and placed with the abusers and told horrendous stories that are not true, not only about the other parent, but about their own story. They're not even they don't have access to that. And the long-term consequences could be very dire for our society, for everyone on the planet. So we really need to be looking into these situations and bringing assistance to people who are experiencing violence. For one, because it's the right thing to do, right? If someone's in harm, please help them. And also because it's going to affect everyone at some point. And it already does in many cases. Domestic violence and post-separation violence are often considered as an individual issue, a relationship issue, a conflict, and that's not at all what it is. I mean, if someone's bullying someone, intimidating them, and harming them, then it's not a relationship question. It's not a conflict question. It's only that we tolerate violence when it's within a couple. That's what it really means. So is there hope? That was a question that we've asked often. That is not the goal of the summit. I have to say the goal of the summit is for us to understand how terrible the situation is. So it's what it is. Was that negative, positive? It's what it is. And we want to have people talk about it. Before we create this summit, if you researched online resources for victims of post-separation violence, there was one result. There was nothing else. That's a year ago. Now, at this point, there are dozens of results. So the summit has brought results. This is what we need to do. Talk about the topic, talk to other people, talk about it, learn about it, read about it, research it, and it will be spoken about. And at one point, it will become a trendy topic. It will become something people talk about. People will not be it will not be as taboo. And in that case, the government agencies and the people who make decisions about our laws and all of that, they will pay more attention to it. They will give it the care that it needs, and they will intervene for our children. So we stop confiding, custody of children to abusers, even those that have been recognized of criminal acts against their own children. And so there is hope because, in a sense, the topic of my presentation today is the individual possibility of the individuals to go from transitioning from a victim to a survivor to a thriver. It's something that I read about many, many years ago that really struck me because it's always been a goal to be like, not feel like a victim, not feel victimized, and to move to being a survivor. Well, what about being a thriver? It's really another option there. So we don't want people to feel as though it always has to be seen in a positive light. You don't always have to find a gift in the situation, and there's not always a good reason why things happen. That is not the message we want to send. However, the only place that right now there can be change is within the empowerment, education, and speaking up about the situation of post-separation violence. Now, another element of hope is in the collective. So the resource center we've created with this summit, and I say we created, it's not my husband and I, we simply presented the opportunity for a summit. The presenters, the attendees, everyone writing us, the testimonials we're getting, that is a collective hope because this is a virtual resource center that has apparently never existed before. And we plan on creating an in-person resource center in Quebec. We want it to be the first, well, hopefully not. I mean, if someone wants to do it elsewhere first, we'll be happy. However, we want to have a resource center in person in Quebec, somewhat similar to the shelters, but I mean, if you've been experiencing post-separation violence for, I don't know, 20 years, you don't want to go to a shelter. So it's a resource center in person that we're putting into place. That will be similar to this summit in the sense that people will be able to come and get access to resources. What is possible? What can I do? Advice too. We will work with professionals too that can provide professional counsel. So if you're interested in participating and helping us out in creating the in-person resource center in Quebec, but then we'll make it duplicatable because I'm a scientist, business also person, and we're making everything duplicatable so that it can be replicated elsewhere, all over, everywhere, in other locations. So the summit also brings together all these different resources and presenters, which means that they also collaborate. They tend to collaborate. So out of all of that, perhaps we will find ways to stop the violence and the abusers. So the last element of hope, I mean, there's plenty, I'm sure there's others, but I mean, one third element of hope I wanted to bring is the training and the testimonials. So more at a society level, the testimonials we're receiving and the training that is in some of the videos, some of the presentations, we are going to work to get accredited by the government agencies to present those to the professional orders, professional associations, so that people who are able to actually support and work with the victims are better informed and better trained. Obviously, that will make a difference as well. So that is all about the topic I'm presenting today, which was from victim to survivor, from to thriver, and how the summit started, where we're at, what all of this is for, the context of this summit that you're going to follow, and also where we're going with all of this. And there was one more thing I wanted to add to that, the theme of the summit. So the theme of this summit this time is transitions. Transitions because a lot of people know about domestic violence and they know that it can continue a little bit afterwards, and they're calling that post-separation violence. But the post-separation violence we're talking about is the one that continues as soon as you leave a domestic violence situation. It could be the 4 times you leave to go to a shelter. That's post-separation violence. There's separation. It's also the violence that continues for years and decades and all kinds of insidious ways, not only in the lives of the victims, because most associations and groups help only the victim themselves, but also their new spouse, the children, the co-workers, the extended family, the neighbors, anyone who could be affected by it. We consider those people to be victims of post-separation violence as well. And they are included in our discussions. They are included in who we are aiming for. And we also wanted to remind people that we use, it's explained another video from the last summit, but I wanted to explain that we use the word victim on purpose because it's easier to find people who want to gather together. It's easier if you use common language, and we use the word violence rather than abuse. And I know a lot of people have a different opinion about that, and I think all terms are, fine. It's just that we've chosen the word violence because violence actually is acts of violence are crimes. They can be recognized as crimes, and the person can be pursued for those in a criminal trial. However, abuse, as far as we've seen, it doesn't really have there is not really a specific way to pursue someone for abuse. Abuse is more of a pattern, violence is more of actions. And violence just sounds way more like what it is. It's really violence, financial violence, it's emotional violence, physical violence, sexual violence. Those are acts of violence. Those are what the criminal trials pursue. And those are what most of the organizations that can intervene actually address. Abuse is more of, like we said before, what it really is a pattern. However, patterns in most places around the world are not recognized by, for example, where I live, you can't be punished for a pattern of abuse. It doesn't, we don't have that yet. Perhaps maybe with the new coercive control law. However, that's very recent. There's a lot of, non-consensus about how that will be used either. So that's why we've used the word violence, and those who use the word abuse, that's fine. And also because violence is a more international word, victim violence. Post-separation, because it's for when you're not together anymore. It's different from domestic violence in that way. So there we go. I'm going to end this here. We're going to play the trigger warning video and the you already watched the intro video,